Welcome to Just Ruth's Grow Your Own Kitchen Herbs and Sprouts workshop. In this workshop, we'll demonstrate an easy and simple mason jar method for growing sprouts or microgreens, plus germinating, seeding, and maintaining kitchen sink culinary herbs at home. This is a two-part workshop, and we'll go ahead and get started with how to grow your own indoor herbs. We've selected these herbs to grow in our indoor containers because they've been proven to do pretty well. So it's basil, oregano, chives, rosemary, parsley, and mint. This first part of pre-germinating the seeds is optional, so you can go ahead and skip to the seeding section if you don't want to do it. But basically, we're giving our seeds a head start here and minimizing the amount of spraying we have to do to keep our seeds and seed trays fully saturated. Here's the supplies that you'll need for pre-germinating your seeds. Of course, you'll need the seeds. You're going to use a spray bottle that's been cleaned and full of tap water is fine, whatever your water source is. Some clean towels or paper towels. We're going to put the seeds on those. It'll be like a substrate. I use Sharpies, but you could use Post-it notes and pens to label your seed bags. And I used used Ziploc bags. You don't have to seal them. What I like to do next is read the back of my seed packet to figure out how many days the plants need to germinate and any instructions, like something likes to spread a lot, so maybe don't plant it next to other things, or they like to soak. I think the hardest part here is not overdoing it. You're not going to fit 400 rosemary plants in your house, very likely, so you want to plant with how much room you have. So maybe 2 or 3 plants of basil. It's really hard not to seed more. 2 or 3 plants of oregano, but you want to seed a little extra because not every seed is going to germinate or make it through the transplanting process. I like to label each bag with the plant name, the date it was seeded, and the expected germination date, so I can check it if things haven't germinated yet. I always try to keep this packaging intact if possible because you're not going to need all of it. You only need a few plants of each herb, and you can continually harvest from them. The first step is to wet your paper towel or a cloth, so I just use my spray bottle to do that. It doesn't have to be soaked. And sprinkle your seeds, spacing them apart evenly as possible. And the tricky part is getting it inside of the bag. You do not need to seal the bag. And basically you're going to do this with the rest of your seeds. Label, spray, seed, and keep in mind, not too much. Found it is quite a bit easier to cover your seeds with another paper towel. It just makes the transfer easier, and you'll want to wet that paper towel too. So here we go, finishing up with all of our seeds. You're going to want to store these bags in a dark place that has decent airflow. So imagine creating the similar situation as if the seeds were underground, so it wants to be a little bit dark. And this is just for the germination part until basically the seedling emerges from the seed coat. Check your seeds daily for germinated seeds. You'll see a little sort of tail coming out of the seed. That is the seed germinating out of the seed coat, so you're going to have seedlings soon. Once you're at this stage, it's time for seeding. Let's go over supplies quickly for seeding. So of course you're going to want your germinating seeds. You can use a tray like this or an egg carton filled with soil. If you don't have seed trays, that's totally fine. I get this soil from garden stores. Seed starting mix is preferable. It has everything the seed needs to grow. And I like to press down or tamp the soil before planting in it, just so I know it's packed in there nice and firmly, but not too firm. You want it to be pretty easy for the plants to send out roots. So that's how you do that. And I like to use popsicle sticks to label my plants. Use whatever you can, but I do encourage you to label, and a Sharpie works great on those. Tweezers are key for germinating seeds. So there I have my label with the date of what the plants are, and I'm using a tweezer to gently move those germinating seeds about 2 to 3 per cell into my cells. Then I cover them with a really light dusting of soil, depending on what the seed packet says, and I give them a deep soak. So I'm not using a hose, I'm using a mister. I don't want to move the seeds around. They're a little bit fragile at this point, so misting is really important. And I mist them every day, sometimes twice a day. They're seated right by a windowsill, so they're getting a good amount of light. My seeds are getting a little bit bigger, and I notice they're leaning towards the window, and they're getting a little leggy or tall, and that's perfectly fine. You can always bring them outside if you'd like to, and they won't get so leggy if they're in direct sun. But for our purposes, this is just fine. So there's the oregano coming up. We've got some parsley coming up. Notice how they're reaching towards the sun. Here's a trick for deep watering your plant starts. After the initial week or two of spraying with your hand, you'll find that the bottom of your seed trays isn't getting damp enough, and you really want water down there so that the roots can grow. So I use this shallow pan. I fill it with water, not too high that it goes over the seed trays. And you'll see if you leave the water in for 1 to 2 minutes, your plants will absorb and become fully saturated. So that water's coming in from the bottom of the tray into the soil. Then I drain them and then put them back on the windowsill. The next step of this process is potting up. We pot up plants to give them more room to grow. If you place 2 to 3 seeds per cell, you can select the healthiest plants and transplant them into a larger container or pot. Keep in mind, it all has to fit on your windowsill. Herbs generally take a long time to grow, but I know I'm ready for the next step when I see the plant has sprouted its true leaves. Here's an example of true leaves of a mustard plant. Here's how cilantro and parsley will look, how lavender and rosemary will look, and how basil will look when they're ready to be potted up. Chives are quite different. I usually just pot them up 4 to 6 weeks after seeding them. And the key to potting up is keeping the root ball as intact as possible. You don't want to injure the roots. I sometimes transplant twice, once into 3.5 or 4-inch pots, and if my plants are really thriving, I'll move them into a larger pot. The last part of this is the harvest. You'll want to wait until your plants are big and healthy to harvest. Mine aren't quite there yet, but for the purpose of this video, I'll show you the pinching method so you can continually harvest and have improved growth in your plants. For plants like basil and mint, the pinching method works really well. Now, just a side note, these are ready to be potted up again. I moved them into small pots with about 2 stems per pot, and now they want a bigger pot. So we're going to pinch off just the top 4 leaves that are growing there, and once we remove those, you'll see that there's more basically seedling sets that are ready to grow and replace them. So I'll hold this up so you can look at it a little bit closer. Those 2 sets are going to come in, and we're going to be shaping our plant while we do this, so it's actually good for the plant's growth. This is pretty much exactly what I do for plants like thyme and oregano. So I'm just going to take a nice section there. And of course, when these plants are bigger, you can take more and bigger sections, but I'm just demonstrating with these small potted plants. And this is really going to help our plant bush out instead of just get tall. Again, I'm doing this with, you could do it with lavender if you want it to be more bushy, and rosemary as well. Just like this. And once rosemary gets woody and hard, as it gets older, it gets more woody, you'll trim off that super hard woody growth and encourage young new growth. And with parsley, I like to take the oldest stem I can, but really just leave some of the plant material on there so it can photosynthesize, but you can harvest quite a bit, obviously not when they're this young. And these guys might be ready for pot up too. Chives is a little difficult. You can try to leave a few leaves on each plant, but because they're clustered, it's hard. So sometimes I just remove the whole thing and harvest it all. The next part of this workshop will be growing edible sprouts or microgreens. Check it out. Let's go over some supplies we'll use for germinating our own sprouts at home. So a clean quart-sized mason jar, and smaller ones are fine too, you'll just make less seed. Canning lids, I use cheesecloth or muslin that's pretty fine, and I cut it into squares, and that's going to be our lid. The seeds are going to want to breathe. I use measuring spoons, and that's optional, you don't need them. And for this one, I'm going to start off with some old broccoli seed I had from the farm. I used 2 tablespoons in a quart-size mason jar for this, and they end up taking up a lot of room, so I wouldn't suggest doing more. If you used a smaller size mason jar, use less seed. Go ahead and fill that up with some water. You're going to cover these jars with cheesecloth and a lid, and you can store them in a dark place. I use my pantry. They're going to want to sit in that water for 24 hours, and that's going to help them pre-germinate. The next day, you're going to rinse and dump all of that water, and then rinse the seeds again with fresh water. But we're not going to leave the water there. We're going to pour it out. You want to strain out as much water as possible. Hence, that's why we use cheesecloth for the lid. And I push down all of the seeds so that they fall back into the jar. And you want to spread those seeds out, so you can swirl them or turn the mason jar around and around so that they get a little bit spread. I lay them on a plate with a paper towel or a cloth, making sure that the bottom of the mason jar is on the lid so that they can naturally drain the rest of the water. So we want them to be damp, but certainly not wet, or that will lead to spoilage. I put them in a dark place for a couple days. Now each day we're going to do the same process. We'll pull them out of the dark space wherever you've stored them. You're going to rinse them, drain them, and put them back on a plate to dry. And we do this twice a day, although I must admit I've done it once a day before and it still works okay. Twice a day is a safer bet. We're going to keep those seeds clean and moist, but not too moist. On day 3, you can start to see some action happening. You see these white root hairs coming out. Now, these are not mold. It's totally normal. They're just searching for water. That's a good sign. On day 4, you'll start to see what looks like sprouts happening. And I know that these need a bit more time, but I'm going to move them to the light now. Now, I think they want a little bit of light. They're going to turn green, and they're almost ready to eat. Here's day 5, totally ready to eat. Now, you'll see some green in them. All the sprouts have sprouted. They've completely filled the mason jar. In order to store these sprouts, I like to use an old container. I poke holes in it and put a paper towel at the bottom. And there you are. Here's some other sprouts that I like to grow at home. We'll just do a quick walkthrough of these since you already know the materials and the process. Okay, so we're going to use just a regular packet of radish seed. Notice that this probably won't give you as many sprouts as the 2 tablespoons we use for broccoli sprouts, but it is still going to be great for a salad or 2. I love to use fenugreek seeds. You can get those at the grocery store. Most will sprout. Hopefully they haven't been treated. I like to sprout lentils too. They're easier to digest for me. I'm going to go ahead and fill all of these jars with plenty of water to do the overnight 24-hour soak. Every seed probably could use more or less time soaking, but I think this is a pretty good bet to go with a 24-hour soak, and don't forget to put them in a dark space. You're going to cover these with cheesecloth again, or whatever materials you have that you can easily dump water in and out of. And I like to just put them on one big plate together just to make it easier to store. Okay, so 24-ish hours later, it doesn't have to be exactly 24, I am just taking my seeds out of the dark space. They were soaking in water, and I'm going to go ahead and start draining these. So we're going to drain and rinse just like we did with the broccoli seeds. Make sure to get those nice and clean and nice and dry before you put them back in a closet or pantry area where it's nice and dark. And spread them around. It's really helpful for having even germination on the seeds. Remember to do this twice a day, every day, until the sprouts are almost ready and are ready to be moved into sunlight. Now that you have the basic skills down, you can experiment with sprouting different types of things. So generally, you'll sprout from 5 categories: beans, grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. And across these categories, you can try dozens, if not more, varieties. Some examples are alfalfa, arugula seed, beets, cress, green peas, kale, mung beans, red clover. Enjoy your sprouting. And that's all. Thanks for watching Just Roots Make Your Own, or in this case, Grow Your Own workshop series. We'll see you next time.